Welcome to another edition of Around with Randall, your weekly podcast on making your nonprofit more effective for your community. And here is your host, the CEO and founder of Hallett Philanthropy, Randall Hallett.
I'm always humbled when you and or anyone takes a moment of their time to join me, Randall, on, in particular, this edition of Around with Randall. Timing is important in the relationship building, donor engagement, donor movement process. What we're going to delve into today is the timing that's required to ask, solicit at the right time. Get into some pretty nuanced thoughts as to how you can better understand when is the right time and maybe when it's not. In previous episodes, we've talked about the importance when we are developing the relationship, making the ask around impact. That's episode 199. You can go back and listen to that and how to connect it to what's actually trying to be accomplished. Not going to spend a lot of time on that today. We're also going to avoid, because we've covered it in episode 204, about really knowing our donors and the passion that they should have to maximize gifts. That's episode 204. You can go back and listen to that. Today is really about exploring the psychological, the emotional, the strategic indicators that reveal if a donor is actually ready for an ask, for a solicitation, for a major gift ask, and how we kind of evaluate that. So a high-level premise in all of this process is that I'm not talking about $100. To be candid, I really believe there's no bad time to ask for $100 because basically it's going to be an email, a letter, maybe a phone call, and you just need to ask. I'm not saying don't have some small talk or be respectful, but at the end of the day, somebody giving you $100, $250 is just going to happen or it's not. What we're talking about are the elevated gift opportunities, major gifts. And I also want to stipulate here at the top, as I try to do often, that I don't classify major gifts as cash. Major gifts are a gift above a certain dollar figure that can include cash, pledges, stock, and most importantly, estate and plan giving options. I never have seen that as a separate category. It's part of the major gift portfolio or options that a donor has to maximize their giving. So as we think about this, we want to delve into and ask the questions, is it the right time? Should I wait? How do I recover? So let's get into the psychology, kind of the high level stuff we start with, and we'll get into the tactical. Why are we talking about this? Well, there's an emotional component, if done well, getting a high enough gift level, behind making a gift, particularly as we talk about transformational giving, which I could give you a whole series of episodes to go back and listen to. Because if we're doing this correctly, we're elevating the connection that we have with our donors, with our prospects, to elevate their gift thought process. And transformational isn't a dollar figure. It's where that emotional core matches what they're trying to do that brings about the highest level of gift or series of gifts that might be possible. When we maximize this conversation to get to that ask, there are probably four things I think about that we need to ensure. Number one is that donors feel that they're seen, i.e., that their values and their interests are clearly understood. You can't get to maximization unless their values and interests are recognized. I think about being raised as a kid by my mom and dad, and how particularly my mother, and how important she said it was to always realize the emotional kind of place, the values and the interests somebody has in a particular moment. And it led me to better understand now what I teach my children, that people will forget what you say, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And this is important in the asking process. If people don't feel as if you are actually interested in them, their needs, their interests, they may give you a gift, but it's not going to maximize. So the psychology behind getting to that ask point starts with seeing. The second is safe. Do they trust the organization? And do they trust the gift officer? I'm going to hold off on this trust piece for just a minute. We're going to circle back to it. and connect you to something else that might be helpful in developing that trust at a much higher level. Number 3 is that it needs to be significant. Significance, as we look at our 4 S's here, isn't about the dollar figure as much back to that concept of, is it meaningful? Is it impactful? People with resources who want to be philanthropic don't make major gifts unless there's impact. Back to that episode 199. And the last is secure of the 4 S's. So seen, safe, significant, final one is secure. Are all of the financial ramifications clearly understood? If someone's making an incredibly large gift, and this is why I include planned giving in the major gift platform, is particularly when it comes to planned giving, they have to feel that the gift coming out of their life isn't going to affect negatively their life. There's an emotional, psychological connection to this. So if you're not ensuring, and this is why I think planned giving was something I naturally came to, certainly going to law school and studying a lot of estate tax issues was part of that. But from a kind of a relationship development process, I was always more interested in making sure they felt more comfortable about the gifts, particularly at the higher levels, $1 million, $10 million more, because if they felt comfortable at making the gift financially, the gift came much more quickly, much more easily. But it wasn't about what I needed. It was based upon what their situation was. So I was trying to make sure they knew I was on their side as well. So the 4 things, the 4 S's that donors need to feel. They need to feel seen, safe, significant, and secure. All this is to lead to the psychological, what I think of as a readiness pyramid. That when we think about our ability to have donors ready for that ask, it's based on a pyramid, so a triangle, and that at the bottom of that pyramid starts with trust. My daughter's doing a project at school, and she comes home every day, and at dinner we sit and chat and talk about the fact they're trying to build a pyramid, some kind of structure. I haven't even seen it. She talks about it every night, and that they're trying to be the tallest one and to hold weight. And I finally looked at her and I said, you know, sweetheart, that if the base is the biggest, the most stable, everything else builds from that. And the next night she came back and she said, Dad, we changed our base. I went, well, that's good. That's what we're talking about here. If your base of the relationship, the psychology to get to that ask isn't based on trust, you're not going to get to a gift, let alone an ask. Above trust comes the idea of alignment. We're going to talk about this here in a moment in the tactical about 2 ways to look at alignment. Not just alignment with the donor, but alignment with the organization. Are you ready? And we're going to break this apart here in the tactical in about a minute and a half. The third is readiness. The top of the pyramid is readiness, and that's what we're here to talk about today. Because you can't be ready to ask. You can't have them ready to be asked unless you have built alignment on top of trust. If you're looking for ways of starting at the bottom and building up to this pyramid with trust, you can go back and listen to episode 214, where I spend an immense amount of time of the things that are required in the trust building process with donors. So this is our theoretical, that there's an emotional component, that it's not transactional, that particularly as we get more complicated assets, the donor has to feel those things that are seen, safe, significant, and secure, and that we're building the relationship based upon the idea of trust at the bottom, then do alignment, and at the top, readiness, which brings us to our tactical. How do we know if we're ready to ask? I look at these in 3 dimensions. This is your tactical. And I think there are 8 questions we have to ask ourselves and be honest about to know that we actually are ready to ask for a transformational, major gift, principal gift, large gift opportunity. So the first dimension is the rational readiness part of someone's thought process, the donor's thought process, in terms of their readiness. Here are the 3 questions. Have they shared personal or emotional connection to the mission, to the purpose, to the impact? This is all the way back to episode 204 in Passion. I didn't think about when I laid these out, and I tried to work ahead a little bit, the connections in these podcasts. But if you don't have passion, we're not figuring out what they want, which we talk about in episode 204, then how are we going to maximize gift? So have they shared their personal and emotional connection? Number 2, did they respond to an invitation and follow up somewhat proactively? Are they being drug into this? There's an enormous difference from someone showing up on their own and they're wanting to engage versus you dragging them and you're throwing that proposal in front of them. We really got to have you. We're going to talk here in probably about 5 minutes about what happens when you don't have a yes to all 8 of these questions. So are they responding and initiating proactively some type of engagement? Number 3, have they referenced their future involvement or deeper engagement? Do they understand what it will mean for them personally? There are indicators that we can know to answer these 3 questions. Do they tell stories about how they're connected? Grateful patients talk about in healthcare, oh my gosh, this physician or this nurse or this care tech did this when I was in the hospital. Alumni do it from the perspective of maybe an experience when they were on campus many years before, or somebody who made a big difference. Do they tell stories? Number 2, do they use ownership language? Do they include themselves? We're trying to accomplish something. That's different than, well, you're trying to do it, because they're not now on board. And it may seem like a simple difference in pronoun, but it's a completely difference in perspective. Do they include themselves as part of the solution, the outcome, the impact, the answer to the question? Number 3, do they ask incredibly good, detailed questions about the work that's going on and the impact? Are they inquisitive, or are they just, you're going to do great things, that's great? That means that they're not engaged. So do they tell stories? Do they use themselves as a part of the solution? Do they ask good questions? There are also red flags that come from this dimension in terms of rational readiness. Are they guarded? Are they only focused on recognition, which we've talked about before isn't the worst thing in the world, but that's not where we're going to get to the highest level gifts? And was there something significant life change? There's the old adage, you shouldn't change 1 or 2 major things at any one time. Making a $5 million gift for someone who has $10 million shortly after a retirement or a loss of a significant loved one or something of that nature, that's one too many. So those are some red flags or things to think about. So the first is rational readiness, them. The second is institutional readiness, us. And here we start talking about whether or not the organization, not just you as the gift officer maybe, or the CEO, the organization's ready. So the first thing is, does it align with a clear priority that the organization is trying to accomplish? Does the donor's interest match up? I have a client that I'm working with where this is an enormous problem. We were testing out options for them to raise more money, and they keep saying, but we need this. And I'm like, yeah, but your donors don't want to give to that. And then they say, but we need more money. And it's just like a bad circle. And I'm not angered. I'm frustrated, not with them, but on their behalf. They need the money, but we have to reposition it. So when you think about individualizing this as an individual donor, asking the questions, are you ready to ask? Do the 2 line up? Number 2, are their internal champions aligned? So this could be people that have to use the money, particularly on larger gifts. Now, if it's a party campaign, then obviously that's probably more clearly defined. But if you're creating an endowment, a chair, or something of that nature, are all the internal people ready to use that money when it's available? There's nothing worse than looking at a donor and saying, yeah, we got your money, but we haven't done anything with it. And believe it or not, I have a client who's dealing with that, where they've accepted a gift like 3 years ago, and it's not $50, and they haven't spent the money. And there's a million reasons why. The donor's finally saying, I don't really care anymore. They weren't ready to ask because they weren't ready to spend. The third question is the stewardship team ready to deliver what's promised? Now, that stewardship team shouldn't be just aligned to the fundraising office or to the organization's foundation office or the development. That's a part of the previous question. Stewardship's not just about communication and recognition. It's about usage. And so are you aligning the internal readiness? If you can't answer all three correctly, the answer is you're not ready to ask because you're not doing something. You're not ready. You're either not aligning it to priorities or there's still a disconnect. Number two is that the internal champions, people using it, aren't ready to use it. And number three, stewardship team's not ready. So you can see some of these red flags if you get these answers. The third dimension that we were talking about here in terms of the 8 questions is really just 2 questions. And this is the external personal timing series of issues to be concerned about or be aware of. Is there something that's a time frame you have to be incredibly aware of? Year end, bonuses, liquidity of an event, selling of a house. You don't, as an organization, may not get to control when that is, which means you may have to speed up 1 and 2 in the dimensions, the rational readiness by making sure that they're ready. And number 2, more importantly, what you're doing internally, which you have more control over. Because if they're going to sell a business, and this is part of that process, so they reduce their capital gains, they are not going to hold it up on you because they may lose that sale. So you got to get everybody aligned in terms of timing. The second thing is what I would call transitions. Is there a natural transition coming for the donor or their family from retirement to, we mentioned, a sale? Maybe there's an inheritance coming. Maybe there's a child's graduation. Maybe there's a terminal illness and they're trying to get things settled. This is to say that there is some emotional context to these 2 questions. Is there something that's time oriented to the calendar and or to their life? Number 2, because these events may cause urgency. 8 questions you have to ask. Just a quick review. Are they sharing their connection? Do they respond to invitations on their own? Are they engaged? Are they doing so affirmatively? And number 2, do they reference their future as a part of this deeper engagement? Do they see that we're doing something? Number 2 is the internal. It's the internal people spending the money and all the things that go along with that. Number 2 is the alignment with the internal leadership, dean of a law school or program leader. How are we going to make sure that they know the value and we're ready to use that money effectively? And number 3 is stewardship, more formally with naming opportunities, things of that nature, but includes a lot of different things. The third dimension, external timing, calendar or personal. Got to make sure if you can't answer all 8 of those questions, to be candid, you're probably not meant to ask for that large transformational gift. They're not complicated questions, but they're things we don't talk about. We're into the weeds of how to get to those major transformational gifts. I do want to spend 1 second talking about holding an ask, because there's a chance you ask these 8 questions and 2 of the 8 maybe not positives. You can reformulate all of this. Before we explore this gift, I want to make sure I best understand what you want most. That's handling maybe an issue with the relational. We're working internally to make sure we maximize your desires, wishes, and dreams. Can we have a month to get it all organized so you feel great about it? How important is the timing issue? Sale of a company, something else that we're working with so that I make sure I align this correctly. Remember, you can say things like, it's important to rush, but it's more important to get it right. This is such an important moment for you. You've expressed such interest in all of this. I want to ensure that this is one of the great feelings, emotions, experiences that you'll go through outside of your family. You want to respect them. And in doing so, what you get is this connection. It's we're the Sherpa, is the term I use for it, relationship match. Lots of different analogies or metaphors. The point is we got to bring lots of things together. Today, I wanted to get into just the absolute nuances of when to ask, how to know when to ask, and maybe a little bit about when it's not ready to ask, what you can do to maximize an ask at some near future point. Getting it right is better than getting it fast. And all too often, our metrics, our incentive-based compensation, other things really speak more toward doing it quickly rather than right. And what I'm advocating is doing it correctly. Slowing down, getting the 70 answers to your questions, because it's not a milestone. Asking is not a milestone. It's a moment based on trust. And it's something our organizations need. And at the end of the day, maybe something you can consider is going through your portfolio, hopefully smaller, other episodes of the podcast, and find your top 10 donors and say, have I got all these answers? 8 questions. And if I don't, how do I pause effectively to get to the answer being yes in every case? That's how you're going to maximize gifts. That's how you're going to create more transformational giving opportunities. That's going to make a difference for your organization and the donor, and also for you. Don't forget to check out the blogs at Hallett Philanthropy, 2 a week. I write all kinds of things. I find it fun. In fact, tend to write too much because I think there's a lot to be said about leadership, about experiences in life, how they may help others kind of look at life in a more meaningful way. Check them out, hallettphilanthropy.com, blogs, 90-second reads. The other thing is if you want to email me, it's podcast@hallettphilanthropy.com. We are feeling like we're maybe on an airplane bouncing around a little bit at about 33,000 feet, up, down every day, sometimes hour to hour. Our nonprofits are trying to figure out financial issues. They're trying to figure out impact issues. They're trying to figure out strategic issues. And wherever you are in the organization, whether you're the CEO, you're a gift officer, you're a board member, you're a staff member, whatever, we're bouncing along. The reason I use that analogy is that I want you to know how important it is what you're doing. The bouncing's not going to stop. I hope it gets a little less, but it's not going to. We're going to have a lot of questions over the next 5 to 10 years we're going to have to solve. Philanthropy and nonprofits serve that gap. I always talk about between free enterprise, which some things they don't want to do because it's not profit possible, and government, which is not always the most efficient. Philanthropy, nonprofits fits the middle. We take care of people and things that are really important that are really struggling. Some people make things happen. Some people watch things happen. Then there are those who wondered what happened. We're people who look for others like ourselves, who are people who make things happen, to take care of, to deal with, to work with, to help those people and organizations and things in our community that are wondering what happened. It's a great way to spend a life, make an impact. I hope you can enjoy a moment or two today and every day to know how important you are to that process. I'll look forward to seeing you the next time right back here on the next edition of Around with Randall. And don't forget, make it a great day.